Okay, perfect. There we go. So, thank you so much for being here today on our session around the potential of AI. We know AI is a hot topic term, and it can seem like AI is being presented as this silver bullet that will solve all our problems. While we don't think that this is the case, it's also important that we engage with it and where it is making improvements to how services are accessed and provided. So, first up, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to our first speaker of the day, Uwais Iqbal, who is the founder of Simplexico. And they're here today to help us demystify AI and discuss what we mean when we talk about AI and frequently used legal actions. So, Uwais, it's great to have you with us.
I guess I meant to talk to you for about 20 minutes or so just to help you understand AI, demystify a few things, and give you a bit of a broad perspective around how to think about the technology and some of the opportunities. I'm gonna try sharing my screen and see if this works. Let me see. Okay. Um, how does that work? Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we can see it. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. So my name's Ois. I'm an AI practitioner, so I don't come from a legal background. I've never practiced. I've never been to law school, but I've worked around the legal space for quite some time. And then around 18 months ago, I set up my own company, Simplexico, and we've ended up doing AI services targeted for the legal sector. So we primarily focus on education. So we do a lot of trainings, a lot of literacy programs around AI. We do a lot of use case design work, finding opportunities, structuring them, how to create business cases around them. And then we also do AI development work, so bespoke implementations of custom AI solutions for legal practice. And this presentation is something we usually do to help level set around artificial intelligence. So we're assuming no prior knowledge, and the goal is to get to a space where, at least conceptually, just around the technology, how do we think about it? How do we understand what the technology can and can't do, and then begin to see some of the opportunities or some of the broader strokes of where AI can be used in legal. So let's start with definitions. If there's one thing I've learned about working with legal professionals, they absolutely love the definitions. So if we come to the definition in the dictionary, we find artificial intelligence being defined as the theory and development of computer systems able to perform tasks that normally require human intelligence, such as visual perception, speech recognition, decision making, and translation between languages. So the idea here is that as humans, when we go out about our day-to-day lives, we perform tasks which require intelligence. So for example, you decided what to wear this morning, you decided what to have for breakfast this morning, you decided to join this call instead of doing something else. So all of those things require a level of human intelligence. So the broad enterprise of AI is thinking about how can we get machines to perform some of these tasks which usually would have to require humans to do. So if you go back in time, John McCarthy, he was one of the founding fathers of AI. He actually coined the term. He defined AI as machines that can perform tasks that are characteristic of human intelligence. So again, it's this broad idea that humans, we can do tasks which require intelligence, which require cognitive skills. How can we leverage machines to start performing some of those tasks? That's the broad enterprise of AI. And then we like to give this working definition at Simplexico for the work we do around thinking of artificial intelligence as a technique that uses machines to replicate the problem-solving and decision-making capabilities of the human mind. So throughout your day, you're making decisions almost at every moment or every juncture. You're solving problems. How do I get to work in the morning? How do I make breakfast in the morning? How do I make a nice cup of tea in the morning? All of those things, they require some level of human intelligence. So the goal here is how do we leverage machines to replicate aspects of what we do as humans very naturally with our own mind? So it's this broad enterprise that as humans we can do lots of cool stuff with our intelligence. Can we start to see and explore how we can use machines instead? So if we break down the two terms, artificial and intelligence, we find something interesting. So the artificial part in AI means that what we're doing is complete mimicry and imitation. I'm guessing you're all familiar with Maggie and Marge Simpson. So we have Marge Simpson. She's driving her car. She knows why she left the house. She knows where she's going, but perhaps to the supermarket or to visit a friend or to run an errand. And she knows what she wants to get out of that journey. So she's in control. And then there's Maggie Simpson. who simply sees her mother and just copies artifacts of her mother's behavior. She just imitates. She turns the steering wheel, she honks the horn. But Maggie lacks this higher level understanding or awareness of what she's doing, why she left the house, why she's even in the car, and what the whole purpose of the journey is. So we can make an analogy here between AI systems and humans. So humans are more Marge-like, that they have this wider, broader context of what they're doing, why they're doing them. And with artificial intelligence, we want to introduce Maggie-like things where we're imitating or mimicking aspects of what humans can do. But the machines, they lack this broader context and this broader awareness. So if any time you're confused about AI, just remember The Simpsons, and that should be helpful. So the intelligence piece means we're looking to solve we're looking to try and replicate some uniquely human capability around problem solving. So if you take something complex like solving a Rubik's Cube, or even something complex like um, giving legal advice or working on a legal matter, that's a uniquely human skill that requires a level of expertise not everybody has. So here we want to focus on what are the truly human things we can replicate when it comes to problem solving. I'm going to skip over the different kinds of AI, and I want to introduce you to this comic. And I think this is a really useful way to think about AI, especially in the context of access to justice. So there's this hybrid between a panda and a rabbit. I think it's a panda rabbit. He decides to build a machine, a robot, and then the panda rabbit goes up to the robot and says, "Hey, here's a broom." Then the robot goes away and does the work, while the panda rabbit, he reads a book and enjoys his time. And then the story takes a twist. The robot sees some spare parts, and what ends up happening is the robot ends up making a smaller robot and offloading the work to the smaller robot, while the actual robot is just relaxing, enjoying a drink and a good book, and the panda rabbit's looking a bit bewildered as to what just happened. So it's a bit sarcastic, but I think within this comic there's a really interesting way of at least conceptually thinking about AI. That there's usually two things we want to consider. The first is around the expertise we're looking to capture. What are we looking to imitate or replicate? So in the cartoon, Maggie was imitating turning the wheel and honking the horn. So with AI, what particular human cognitive skill or decision-making capability are you looking to mimic through the use of a machine? And then the second question is, with machines, we can easily replicate. Ones and zeros are super easy to copy and replicate. So how do we benefit from scale? How do we benefit from being able to replicate machines? So traditionally, in domains like legal and medicine, the bottleneck has always been the human being, or the skill or the experience within the human being. And it's not particularly easy to transfer expertise from one human to another. You have to go through 20 to 30 years of training and experience to get to a level where you're able to deal with very, very complex issues. But the opportunity with access to justice in particular comes around thinking about, are there aspects of legal expertise we can capture through the use of machines with AI, and then scale that expertise so that the human is no longer the bottleneck, so that there isn't enough uh, human minds with the relevant legal expertise to solve or to meet the need of the demand of legal services with access to justice. Can we start to meet that demand through the use of machines by capturing the right level of expertise and scaling it in a sensible way through the use of machines? So access to justice and AI there are interesting opportunities to think about. Um, Briefly, I'll take you through this, but there's a couple of other things I wanted to mention. So an analogy is given that AI is the new electricity because it's going to have far-reaching impact across society. And at Simplexical, we've come up with this framework of thinking about three levels of engagement with electricity that we usually have, and then three levels of engagement that we have with AI, and it maps on quite nicely. So at the first level, we have the fundamental technology. So every home or every city or every building has access to electricity. It's almost taken as an assumed fact that anywhere you go in the world, most modern cities, you'll walk into a building and it would have access to electricity. That's just part of the nature of how society is structured today. And then over one level higher, you have applications. So you have electrical appliances which make use of the technology. So, for example, I have my headset, I have my monitor, I have my laptop, I have my lights. All of these things, they're electrical appliances which make use of the technology. And then I can take a particular appliance like my laptop, and I can use it for a whole variety of things. I can use it to send emails. I can use it to write code. I can use it to give a presentation about AI. So I can do a whole host of things with it. But we have this natural way of thinking about the technology application and use when it comes to electricity, and we can map it quite nicely on how we should be thinking about artificial intelligence. So we have this new overarching technology around generative AI, LLMs, which has emerged over the past 1 to 2 years. So this is similar to electricity. It's like this base fundamental technology which has become readily accessible to almost everyone. And then above that, we have AI applications. So just like we have electrical appliances, we now have AI-powered applications. So things like ChatGPT, things like Microsoft Copilot, things like Bing Enterprise Chat, all of these things are AI applications which make use of the fundamental technology. And then I can take something like ChatGPT and use it for a whole variety of things. I can use it to summarize. I can use it to help me draft a blog post. I can use it to help me write a letter to my boss explaining why I'm not happy with my job, for example. So we have this almost similar way of thinking about electricity that we can apply to AI. But I guess the big difference is that we have a lot more lived experience with electricity as opposed to with artificial intelligence. We're still learning and getting familiar with what AI can and can't do. So with electrical appliances, for example, you know what a toaster can do, you know what a kettle can do, and you know what a microwave can do. But more importantly, you know what a kettle can't do, you know what a toaster can't do, and you know what a microwave can't do. So if, for example, one morning you woke up and you decided to make toast for breakfast, but instead of using the toaster, you decided to use the kettle, what do you think would end up happening? What do you think would end up happening? You'd end up with soggy toast in the morning because you used the wrong application for what you were trying to get out of it. And I think part of what's been happening with the interest and hype around AI in the legal industry is that everyone has become with ChatGPT, and it's almost become the microwave of the AI world, where everyone's trying to cook everything inside ChatGPT, inside this microwave, without realizing maybe they need something a bit more specialized or something a bit more nuanced. So the big question I think the legal industry has to ask itself is the work you're doing or the area where you're wanting to explore and apply AI to, is that more of microwave cooking? Are you trying to make jacket potatoes in a microwave? Or are you trying to do things which is more Michelin star preparation where you need high quality and high fidelity outcomes for customers with legal advice? And the difficulty here is that you'd never see a Michelin star chef taking a microwave ready meal and serving that to a customer. That would be that would be sacrilege. And I think we need to think about these AI tools in a similar way that these generic consumer-facing AI applications, they're quite similar to microwaves. They're not going to help us get the high quality fidelity outcomes we need, and we might have to think about how can we create specialized high quality applications to meet the demand of Michelin star style quality and preparation for legal practice. So that's a bit of an introduction to AI, at least conceptually, so that we can define it, we can understand that what we want to do is think about capturing expertise and scaling it, and we can make this parallel with electricity around the technology, the application, the use, and we can make this distinction between are we doing high fidelity or low fidelity outcomes with the types of tools we're using. So I briefly wanted to touch on AI in the legal industry and what we've been seeing at Simplexico, and hopefully this should help ground the discussions a bit more. So a lot of the time people are talking in these vague terms: artificial intelligence, generative AI, large language models, foundational models, which is great. But I think in order to really ground the discussion into how this technology can be applied in a practical way, what we've done at Simplexico is in our engagements and our conversations and workshops with customers, we've tried to almost create a way of translating between what AI is getting really, really good at and the types of things lawyers have to do on a day-to-day basis, or they tend to do a lot of on a day-to-day basis. So trying to map between the two so we can create the language for finding the right opportunities. So we've come up with what we call the legal AI actions. And these are the areas where AI is good at mimicking, where lawyers tend to be involved in these day-to-day tasks in their workflows or in their delivery of legal services. So it includes things like extracting information, labeling information, comparing information, organizing information, finding information, drafting information, summarizing information, and more recently, translating information, transcribing information, and interrogating information. So once we take the conversation away from AI in this broad sense to these actions of practically what lawyers are actually doing and how we can start to use machines instead, hopefully in your mind you should start to see where these actions are being, if you're close to legal practice, you should already start to see where some of these actions are being performed in your workflows. And anywhere you see these actions, these are opportunities for where artificial intelligence can be applied. But what's different with AI in legal? AI has been around in legal for a number of decades. But what's new this time and what's changed this time? The big shift that's happened is this emergence of generative AI or ChatGPT with large language models. With prior to generative AI, the types of things AI systems were really good at and the types of things lawyers tended to do on a day-to-day basis had a very, very small overlap. So the only types of things you could use AI systems for in legal was really around classifying information or just extracting information. But now post-generative AI, what's happened now is that machines have become really, really powerful at manipulating language. And a lot of what happens in legal is around manipulating language and restructuring or reorganizing information in language. So now the overlap between what AI systems are really good at has a significant overlap with the types of things lawyers tend to do on a day-to-day basis. And perhaps over time we'll see this overlap increase. But what perhaps we're going to see in the future is where there is this overlap between what machines are good at and what lawyers tend to do on a day-to-day basis, some of that work being offloaded to machines and AI systems. So bringing in Maggie into the mix, so Maggie can do the mimicry and the imitation of aspects of legal process and legal workflows. And then outside where only humans can actually do that work will be more Marge-like work, which will require high-level context, high-level understanding, engagement with humans, more strategic thinking around opportunities. So I think we're beginning to see these types of shifts, but I think this will take a lot of time for technology to really be adopted in legal practice in a way where it's actually transforming workflows and transforming legal services. And in the context of access to justice, this becomes really exciting because if there are aspects of legal workflows or the delivery of legal services which require these actions, then AI can be introduced into those workflows to create embedded workflows with AI that can be much more scalable than one-to-one advice with a human. So I think there's interesting ways the technology can be applied. So what's the future of AI in legal? Um, I like to give this analogy that within the medical industry, there's an entire sub-industry around medical devices. And the whole purpose the industry around medical devices exists is to function in a way to create bespoke electrical appliances that help medical practitioners deliver better outcomes to their patients. So there's an entire industry around this, and the equipment becomes very, very specialized. Like you have specialized cardiovascular medical devices, you have specialized radiography medical devices specific to practices within healthcare. And I think it's still early days for AI in the legal industry, but at least how we see the future, we see it in a similar way that AI within the legal industry will be a similar sub-industry where AI will be where applications and AI systems and AI enabled workflows will be created in a similar way to support legal professionals delivering better outcomes to their clients. So I think just to give you just a frame of a vision of how impactful AI could be across the legal industry, just look towards the medical devices industry, and that should give you a sense of how embedded AI can become or could become in the future, and the extent of how it can be applied across the entire healthcare industry, and similarly across the entire legal industry. So, what's the future? I guess the future is around the people in this room or on this call engaging in the right types of conversations, asking the right types of questions, pushing and challenging the status quo. That AI is such a wildly new technology. It's going to take a lot of friction against the status quo to actually get people to think about seriously how this technology could actually be implemented and actually have a big impact in things like access to justice and create good outcomes for society. So I guess the challenge is that for each and every one of you, I would ask, there's a possible future for AI within the legal industry. There's one where AI is hyped to incredible levels and everyone approaches it as a magic silver bullet and we have all of these crazy promises around AI. And there are other futures where we're more pragmatic or sensible about AI as a technology and what it can and can't do, and really focus on what it can do to enable access to justice and enable better outcomes for underprivileged members in society and society more generally. So I guess the task is for you to become more familiar with the technology, become more curious in terms of thinking about how things could be done differently, and begin to explore some of those opportunities of hey, we have this is a cool idea. Could AI be applied in this space? Let's go try and experiment something. So I think being open to that innovation or that curiosity or that playfulness of just thinking differently and exploring how things could be done differently, I think that will be the start of this process of actually driving change through this technology. And I think that has to come from the people involved in these communities, in these uh, outcomes or in these processes around access to justice. So I think I'm at time. I'm not sure if we have time for questions, but if anybody wants to reach out, I'm quite active on LinkedIn and I post regularly about AI in the legal industry. So if you're interested, feel free to connect and drop me a message. This is my email address. If anybody has any questions or wants to chat about AI, feel free to drop me an email, and we can set up some time. So I think I'll stop there. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Waze. That was a really incredible overview of the uses of AI and kind of thinking about where we can take this conversation forward. We do have time for some questions, so it would be really great if anybody has anything they want to say. Oh, I see a hand from Tony Guys. Go ahead.
Right. Good. Uwais, thank you very much for the presentation. Thank you, Emmeline and Claire, for once again another great jig. Uwais, I just wondered how you saw AI playing a role in the tier one, the online guidance and advice space that it is no longer, it seems to be provided by the government, but we at DEF are looking at developing tier one like portals, and I know that Jennifer Harris from Tenancy Deposit Scheme is here today. Hopefully she'll be able to speak about the work they're doing on the housing side. Do you see a role for AI in the tier one space, Uwais?
You mean in terms of accessing advice and know-how?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. So we think there is an opportunity there around removing the barrier for at least for people who are less kind of digitally savvy, who maybe the older generation or people who aren't as comfortable with technology, where now you have like voice to text and all of these things, being able to access data and information through those systems becomes much easier. So a lot of what AI is good at, and we're just finishing a project with an Austrian law firm, and they have knowledge portals and insight portals they create for their in-house clients, and we've taken a subset of their know-how around a particular EU legislation and created like an interactive natural language querying process around it, so you can very easily interact with it. So I think there are opportunities to create well-curated legal advice, structure it into databases, structure it into the right format, and then create interfaces where it's much easier to access, whether that's through natural language or whether that's through spoken language, so that you can remove the barriers, like remove the technology barriers or remove that I don't know that threshold that people have to have a level of technical competence or digital competence to be able to access legal advice. So I think there are interesting opportunities to do that, and uh, a lot of what a lot of the opportunities around capturing the expertise. So the legal expertise is usually tacit within the mind. So it's about how do you make that explicit, and usually that's through content. And if you can make it explicit through content, then you can connect it with an AI system or connect it with some form of language model, and then give people access to it so they can find what they need from it.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Did anybody else have a question for Luis while we're here? We've got a time for another question. You're welcome to put anything that you want in the chat, or you can raise your hand and I can call on you. Yeah, Victoria, go ahead.
Hi everyone. Hi guys. We've spoken before, so it's good to hear you again. Thank you so much for what you've been saying. But one of the things that so I've been trying to use ChatGPT quite a bit to see how good it is at giving legal advice, particularly in the employment area. And one of the things that I've kind of realized is that there's so much about prompting it correctly. And I was wondering if you've got any suggestions for, like, I don't know, is there sort of a 10-minute summary somewhere, or a sheet which you can use to kind of better prompt? Because I've kind of found that, like, telling it that I want it to be a UK employment lawyer, and telling it that I want it to only use gov.uk or acas.co.uk websites and things like that is really helpful. And I just wondered if you've seen anything, or you've got anything yourself that you would share that would help people kind of learn how to better prompt ChatGPT in this instance, but I guess anything that comes out like that.
Yeah, sure. I think part of it is playing around and seeing what works and what doesn't work. There's not really a refined science around how to prompt, but there are emerging like techniques. So I think if you Google around, I can share a particular one, but there's resources around how to prompt. I think there's less resources around how to prompt for legal specific things, but just to be aware of that when you're prompting, you don't want to be using ChatGPT as a search engine. And I think that's the challenge, is that because the whole of the internet has basically been fed into ChatGPT as part of its training, people tend to use it as a glorified search engine. But that's never what it was designed for. It's a language model. It manipulates language and it predicts words. So it's always probabilistic, and it never has factual outcomes. So I think where it becomes interesting is if you take the core technology and like Tony was saying, connect it to content databases which are factual, which are trustworthy, then you can still kind of balance between the power of what these language models can do, and then balance between factual and verified information. So I would say be cautious around using ChatGPT as a search engine, because there's no verification. It's just regurgitating words based on what it's seen in its training, and there's no guarantee that what it outputs would be completely correct or factual. I can follow up with some prompting resources, but I think the best thing to do is to play with these tools, but then understand more deeply like what a language model is, and how a language model works, because it's not designed to give you factual information, if that makes sense.
And I see that there are a couple other questions here from Diana and Manpreet. Why don't we go ahead and take one more live, and then we are going to kind of put the rest in the chat. So Manpreet, if you go ahead and ask your question, we can get one more in quickly. And then Diana, if you're okay, you can pop it in the chat. And then Uwais, you can answer that there.
Hi, Uwais. Thank you very much. Just wanted to ask you a quick question. What safeguards can protect users from biases in AI systems, especially those that might harm vulnerable populations?
I'm sorry, I don't have a good answer to that question. I think it's a very hard question, and I think even the people who build and design these models are struggling to create the right safeguards. The problem comes from not the models themselves, but the data these models are trained on, because they've basically scraped everything which is available on the internet, from the good stuff to the really, really bad stuff and the really toxic stuff. That their expertise gets scaled, or that bias gets scaled inside these models, so it becomes a very, very big problem. I don't think there's a really good way to safeguard it, because what's happened is that these tools have been designed like microwaves, and it's very hard to create safeguards around something which is very, very general, which has this like general output, if that makes sense, and it can be used for a whole variety of things. I think if there's more targeted, specific capabilities, then I think it's a bit easier to create safeguards around, if that makes sense. And I don't think that's been done yet. But I think it is a real concern, because now everyone has access to ChatGPT, for example, and they might be asking it for legal advice. Will it give different responses based on the persona of who is asking the legal advice, or the person, or their kind of like what demographic they might be from? So the bias within these models is there, and I think it's an open question, an open issue. But that's why I think that it's important for like the legal community to actually like raise these questions and raise these things, because they are of concern, and I don't think there's good enough responses or answers to them.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Uwais. I think that's a really interesting point about more targeted tools and capabilities kind of make that a bit easier. And I know that's something you were talking about in your presentation as well about developing legal AI. So that's definitely something to think about as we move forward. I see there's quite a few more questions in the chat, so it would be great if you could just answer those in the chat. Thank you so much, everyone, for an engaging discussion there, and thank you, Uwais, again.
Thank you.
So we are going to move on to our next presenter. Unfortunately, Natalie Byram was supposed to speak at this point, but she's unable to join us today. But we are sending her huge congratulations on the birth of her child. So that's very exciting, and we're really keen to have her back at a future session to discuss her work. So with that in mind, we are delighted to welcome Samuel Omaleghe, who is the Head of Strategy and Research with the Legal Services Board. Samuel is going to be speaking to the LSB's work in this area, including some of the updates on their approach to regulating AI use. So Samuel, go ahead and take it away. Thank you so much for being here. Yep, thank you.
Excellent, excellent. We've finally got there. Hello, everyone. Good to meet you all. So just for introduction, my name is Samuel Omaleghe, and I joined the Legal Services Board about 8 weeks ago as Head of Strategy and Research. My background is working in a variety of policy and research roles, mainly within a variety of central departments within Whitehall. Prior to just joining the LSB, I used to work at the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, supporting an independent expert committee that was advising government on new and emerging tech and thinking about regulatory reform to maximize the benefits for the UK. Really, really excited to be here and talk about, I suppose, in particular, thinking about the regulatory aspects of this conversation and thinking about what the LSB has done and continues to do in this space. One thing to just highlight, particularly when it comes to the Q&A section, some of you will be familiar with this, but during a general election, and there's normally a bit more restrictions on public servants and civil servants, etc., in terms of what one can say, etc. So if one was to ask me, for example, questions that are of a strongly political nature in the Q&A, I probably won't be able to answer. But nonetheless, that gives quite a wide scope to discuss some of these pertinent issues. So first things first, I think it's worth reflecting, I suppose, on my title around the regulation of technological applications. That term is quite deliberate. One of the debates that's occurring within this space is whether you regulate the technology or whether you regulate the application of the technology. So what do I mean by that? So the example is, to what extent does one want to regulate AI as a technology, or more so regulate the applications of it? Generally, from what I've seen in my experience, there's a case for thinking about the applications of the technology rather than the technology itself. Because for AI and other transformative technologies, the applications are so broad and transformative that one needs to think about the applications across multiple sectors and think about what may be appropriate for relevant sectors. So it might be the case that for a particular technology like AI and using it within health, you might have a slightly different configurement of what regulation might look like compared to other sectors. So I just thought it's worth reflecting on that. So in terms of my presentation, I'll focus a bit on the Legal Services Board, who we are. And I thought that rather than just jumping into some of the work that we've done and our regulatory approach towards more broadly technology and innovation rather than specifically AI, I thought it's worth just taking a bit of a step back and just reflecting on some of the wider challenges around regulation of new and emerging tech, more broadly speaking, and thinking about some of the toolbox, I suppose, that's in that regulators have to call upon to try and address a particular challenge around the pacing problem, which I'll come on to in a bit. So the Legal Services Board, who we are. So the Legal Services Board, we oversee the regulation of legal services in England and Wales, and we were born as a result of the Legal Services Act in 2007. We're essentially an oversight regulator, so we oversee the performance of the 8 regulatory bodies who carry out the day-to-day direct regulation of legal services. So, for example, the Solicitors Regulatory Authority and a few others as well. So as part of the Act, we have a statutory duty to promote 9 regulatory objectives, which are set out in the Act. I won't list all of them, but one of them is around improving access to justice, but also encouraging independent, strong, diverse, and effective legal profession. And then the final point is around we're independent of both the legal profession and government and accountable to Parliament. So just reflecting on what I've termed here the impossible challenge addressing the pacing problem. This is often characterized by the fact that new and emerging tech is moving so quickly that some deem that it's impossible for the regulatory system to keep on top of, and that by the time you've devised whatever framework you might want to set up, it becomes out of date because technology moves so fast. And that's I suppose that's the problem statement. How do you enable a regulatory system that can, at the very least, try to keep up with the advent of new and emerging technology, which can move quite quickly? And there are those who perhaps take quite one might term a fatalistic view to say, actually, it's a case where this is just an impossible challenge, and regulation is just something that we'll just have to try and keep up as much as it can. And I can see that point of view, and it's legitimate, and there are definitely some of the challenges associated with that. But I take a bit more of an optimistic view and think that there are things within both the LSB's toolbox, but also other regulators' toolbox that can put it in a better position to address some of the challenges in this space. So what are some of these, I suppose, tools in the regulatory toolbox that one can call upon? I think the first one is around regulators as a wider community being more future facing and recognizing that we don't necessarily have to wait for the future to arrive at our doorstep and to manifest itself. There are tools out there from an analytical perspective that one can draw upon to try and not necessarily predict, but to understand what multiple scenarios may be there and to plan for that, and to try and think about multiple scenarios and think about what one may do. And a lot of regulators now are trying to build a horizon scanning capability. So that's something that some of the legal regulators, but also the regulatory bodies like the Law Society and the SRA have in-house capabilities on that. But also the LSB very recently, as part of our business plan for 2024, 2025, we're trying to increase our capability on that as well, and trying to think about what may be coming down the line that we need to think about in terms of wider trends and drivers of change, and then reflecting on what does that mean for the legal sector, what does that mean for regulation, and then what does that mean for the LSB. And it just enables us to be on the front foot and to be proactive and to think about where some of these trends may manifest itself into either opportunities or may result in consumer detriment, and we need to be mindful of it. The second point is around, again, going back to the exam question about how do you keep up with this particular pacing problem, as is sometimes termed. One of the potential options towards that is enabling a regulatory framework that's outcomes focused. There's in previous instances, there's been sometimes a tendency.
I'm not sure if it's.
Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So as I was saying, outcomes focused. I think one of the ways of addressing that particular challenge of the regulatory framework being redundant by the time a new update or the technology has moved on is to try and create something that's a bit more future-proof. And there's been a bit of a movement towards trying to create a regulatory framework that's a bit more outcomes focused. So rather than thinking about a prescriptive focus and salience on the technology itself, is thinking about more broadly what the technologies and innovation are trying to do, thinking about some of our bigger priorities such as access to justice, and thinking about the outcomes that we desire, and really honing in on that rather than being very prescriptive on the technology itself. The third is around regulatory experimentation. When thinking about some of these new and emerging tech, and thinking about how they, I suppose, evolve, sometimes I think it's important and critical, in fact, to think about ways to try and create experimentation as the technology develops and it interacts with the regulatory framework, and think about ways of learning as you go rather than thinking about defining a definitive regulatory framework that encapsulates all sorts of scenarios. So one of the examples that's quite prominent within this particular space is thinking about regulatory sandboxes, which is the idea that you create an environment where technological innovators can work with multiple partners, including the regulators, to test and trial their particular product and services, and think about how it would work within a particular, I suppose, safeguarded confined space, as a prelude to then potentially learning from that and then potentially scaling up. And then the final other couple of reflections, I think public dialogue and public acceptability is so critical. We've seen in multiple instances where you get a bit of a hype curve with a particular technology, but due to either perceptions or realities in terms of how it interacts with the public, there isn't that adoption, or there is potentially a backlash against it. So one has to think about I suppose, the facets of how we think about public and bringing the public with us. And then the final point is around international regulatory cooperation. When thinking about new and emerging tech, whilst understandably we will gravitate towards thinking about the technology within a UK context, and within the confines of this conversation, thinking about the legal sector, it's quite often that new and emerging technologies do not necessarily respect national borders. So, and some of the challenges that are prominent in this particular space are not unique to the UK. So there's something incumbent on us in terms of thinking about how other countries and jurisdictions are addressing some of these challenges, thinking about where we can learn from them, but also as well thinking about where, if we think that the UK has got the broad right approach, thinking about ways we can share what we've done so that others can learn as well. And the LSB has done a couple of things on this. So, for example, we recently met with our counterparts in South Korea. So we met with some of their officials from their equivalent of the Ministry of Justice to learn about their approach. And while there are some restrictions in terms of extrapolating what they do, for example, because they're very different from the UK in certain aspects, there were nonetheless still some things we could learn from them. So, for example, they recognize some of the challenges around access to justice, in particular rural areas. So they have a bit of a model where they have a mechanism where they appoint certain.
Hi, Samuel. Sorry to interrupt you. Just if we could wrap up in the next 30 seconds, minute or so, just because we're running tight on time, and I appreciate that. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's fine. So very quickly, I'll just highlight our statutory guidance that we've published very recently. So it focuses on outcomes. Those are the three outcomes there: making sure that regulation enables the use of technology, making sure that regulation balances the benefits and risks, and then making sure that regulation fosters a regulatory environment that's open to providers and innovators. So I'm happy to share the slides afterwards, but let me know if you've got any questions.
Thank you so much for that. That was really useful. We're going to be circulating everyone's slides after the meeting. For anyone who has any questions, please put it in the chat. And Samuel, if you could just respond to them there, that'd be great. So moving swiftly along, as we're a bit short on time, Amit Kohli is the head of data insights at Access Social Care, and he's going to give a very quick update on how they view and explore AI at Access.
Thanks so much. Just jumping right into the conversation about AI, we were mentioning safeguarding. I think Manpreet brought up an excellent question. By the time the model is developed, it's already too late. We need to ensure that the data is out there in order to ensure that we have the training information to create the models of the future, so that in 10 years, we don't have a problem where, for example, it assumes that all doctors are male and all nurses are female. That's the very typical one. But I think it's important to note that this is a tool that applies to us within the nonprofit sector, for example. We can often feel that technology is something that's far, far ahead. It's important to understand that AI of these days is not only incredibly powerful, but it is also incredibly accessible, right? So that makes things possible that never were before. The thing that I want to talk about with this exact concept is that we have to divide what is an efficiency gain and what is a radical change. An efficiency gain is, for example, what Weiss was talking about, the microwave, right? So enabling you to do the work that you're doing, but much more efficiently. It also allows for radical change, and that is what our organization is using it for. So at Access Social Care, we provide free legal advice to people with social care needs, helping to achieve a better quality of life. Unfortunately, the needs of social care are effectively rising at a rate that is very difficult to keep up with. So even if we tried to hire more lawyers to provide assistance, we'll realize that we will never be able to win this on scale. So that's where this organization started turning towards technological solutions, including the usage of, for example, AI. So at Access Social Care, we are using AI currently in our chatbot called Access Ava, which maybe some of our staff can put the link there. But Access Ava effectively allows people to describe their situation and receive bespoke advice that is actually confirmed by a lawyer to ensure that they can get to the next step in their journey towards securing social care. Of course, not everything is fully mapped out yet, so we have an AI component in which people can ask a question, and we will try to guide them towards content that we have. We are also experimenting with creating our own GPT-based model, which is quite advanced. If I had more time, I would talk a little bit more about that. It is absolutely interesting to see how close it can get very quickly, but how far, what the difference is between 95% and 100% in terms of strategically and tactically providing the right advice. So that's a little bit about how we are using this. The concept of using AI when there are safeguarding concerns, when the solutions may be applicable to the norm, but not necessarily to vulnerable populations that we're most worried about, is really quite topical and really important, and we have to think about it a lot. But you also have to take into consideration the cost of not doing anything. So some of you may be familiar with the Helsinki Agreement, which said that it is unethical to conduct a controlled study in which I have a solution that I know works to some degree, and I choose to give other people the control. That is actually unethical because you are purposefully preventing somebody from achieving a better result. I'm not saying that we are there now with AI. I'm saying it is an interesting question to ask as a sector to say, when do we get to the point where people that are using ChatGPT blindly because they do not have the support that they need to move where they need to be, when does it become more damaging to not provide a bot that helps them at least safely navigate the AI ecosystem, right? There is no answer to that. Some additional challenges that we've been facing with AI. Obviously, without regulation, it is very difficult to understand where to take this. But also, there's huge costs towards embracing this technology. The cost of a tech team is something that legal perhaps is not familiar with. There's also requirements on data maturity in terms of trying to understand even what your requirements are. Lawyers might not be the best set of users to create user requirements because it's simply a different frame of thought. So you really have to invest in data in order to even understand what your problems are and what's solvable. It's also really difficult to ensure that your board is comfortable with taking a technological direction. That takes a little bit of thinking and strategic thinking about, what is the theory of change? Where are you actually trying to accomplish? Where are you going? And yeah, I think, the funders, we have to talk about the fact that funders might not necessarily feel comfortable funding an AI-based solution for some of the things that we need to do. And yet we do have to do these things in order to meet the demand. So it creates this kind of an uncomfortable position where we're sometimes a little bit back leading funders into figuring out what they need to do in order to allow us to expand our scope and take it to the next level. Just one last thing that I wanted to talk about is we also have to take into consideration that there's gaps everywhere, and those gaps could be plugged by any technological solution. So we also have to take into consideration a fully digitized future where there is one way to reach social care to achieve your objectives, and that is exclusionary of anybody that does not have the digital maturity to access those things. We have to be super careful when we're talking about legally allotted rights, like the right to social care, for example. We need to make sure that the way that we democratize this and really hit the numbers that we need does not leave out certain people, right? And also the word that I start using is we need to prepare for the first case where following AI advice leads to a loss of life. We need to start talking about that, to start understanding what does that mean? Where will that take us? What lessons can we learn from the self-driving cars? Now, I would love to keep talking, but I think I'm out of time.
I'm sorry. We're running a really tight schedule here across the board. But I really appreciate that update. And if anyone has questions, please, again, put them in the chat. We can go from there. But we're going to move swiftly to our joint presentation by Paul Massey, who's the CEO of Tabled, and Dr. Paul McEwen, who is the Associate Professor and Head of Education at Northumbria Law School. They're going to provide a walkthrough on the process of developing a tech tool. So over to you both.
Hello, everyone. My name is Paul McEwen. I'm, as introduced, the Associate Professor at Northumbria University, and I've been working with Paul Massey at Tabled. And I think actually the previous talks have set us up quite nicely for us to talk about a project that we've been working on and a project that we're about to move into. So I think Paul's going to take us through what we've been doing. So for time purposes, I won't talk any more, and I'll let Paul share what we've been doing.
Great. Okay. Well, we're going to talk to you about an Innovate UK funded project to integrate LLMs, large language models, into the forthcoming Libra Access to Justice app that is being put together in partnership between my legal tech company, Tabled, and the Northumbria Law Clinic and some other participants as well, and very much hoping to collaborate with others. So just briefly to introduce Tabled. So we are essentially an integrated case management system, legal workflow automation platform. So we work with in-house legal teams and increasingly A2J, Access to Justice providers on managing their casework, managing documentation, etc. And Northumbria Law Clinic is one of our clients, hence why we've started to build the Libra app. And our platform actually has a number of components, but it allows different legal providers to interact with each other on matters. We also have a white label app that can sit on top of these case management systems to allow the public to interact with the lawyers behind the scenes, as well as a no-code decision tree builder, which is a form of AI where you've got hard-coded workflows that users can go through to self-serve on legal issues. So working with Northumbria's Law Clinic, they obviously have huge demand for their services, free pro bono law clinic, and realized actually what would be helpful would be to have an app that the public could use before they get to the law clinic, to both self-serve on their own legal issues, but also to help to triage to the law clinic and other legal providers. And that is where the idea for Libra has come from. And on top of Libra, we're now building an AI application. So if I just go through this, so the AI side of Libra is under a project called Project Odyssey, which is a 2.5 million Innovate UK funded project. So you can see here the partners are ourselves, Tabled, and Northumbria University. But a major partner are the National Archives, who you'll know host, or on behalf of the Crown, hosts legislation.gov.uk, find case law. So essentially the biggest primary legal data set in the UK, 150,000 unique visitors a day to that data set, and all open data. We're also working with Keele University and Swansea on AI and law clinic aspects. So to introduce why this was funded by Innovate UK, so this is a quote from Sir Geoffrey Voss, Master of the Rolls, talking about ChatGPT, that to realize its full potential, it really needs to understand the principles on which lawyers, courts, and judges operate, because the current version, as we've heard earlier, just doesn't have a moral compass. And you can see this from DALL-E, which is their image generator from OpenAI, from slightly different prompts into the DALL-E system, around what would an AI lawyer look like, or an AI legal journey look like. You get very different images produced by that. And that's the same when a litigant in person, or even a lawyer, goes to ChatGPT asking questions about their legal issue. Different information gets spat out each time, and a lot of that is down to prompting, which we've already heard about quite a bit. And that obviously creates some challenges. There's various court cases in the UK and the US where ChatGPT has hallucinated information that's then been quoted in court, and judges have picked up on that. So Project Odyssey is seeking to address those risks for litigants in person, because we know litigants in person are already using ChatGPT. So we want to give them an interface to make it more reliable, or at least to research how that can be done using this refined data set. So what we're doing is enriching the National Archives legislation with much more metadata behind that, machine readable, so that the LLMs can be fine-tuned and work more closely on that refined data set. That will then be delivered via the Libra Access to Justice app, so that litigants in person can actually access that in a more controlled environment. We're already releasing the Libra app using decision tree functionality, and part of the idea is to use those decision trees to create standardized prompts into the LLMs. So I think that feeds in quite nicely to some of the things that have been talked about. So just to visualize that a little bit more, you've got in the bottom left, the bottom right box, so refining LLMs trained on National Archives data sets, using those in the Libra app, and a rules-based legal QA engine. So just to sort of go into a bit more detail there, so the XML files will be enriched, fine-tuning the LLMs, and then rules-based prompts into those LLMs in the app. And I think these slides will be shared later, so I won't go into the text in too much detail. Sorry for all the text on these couple of slides. These are actually taken from some of the Innovate UK pitch slides. So metadata enrichment. So again, this is probably one for the data scientists, but essentially you're looking to really understand the graph of data behind legislation and case law, link that data together, provide deontic reasoning. So looking at where the obligations are, what are the conditions, giving the LLMs much more to get their teeth into, rather than just simply what an LLM does right now, which is look at how often words come in front of each other. And that's a very basic view of how an LLM works, I'm sure, from a non-technical person here. So for example, looking at how there are hierarchies within legal subject matter, the way there are different versions released, and ensuring that the correct version is released, the different jurisdictions within even the UK between different Scottish laws, for example, or England and Wales, and how that can be differentiated. Whereas at the moment, with certain prompts into ChatGPT, you're as likely to get a law coming back to you from New Zealand as you are from England and Wales, let alone Scotland. So it's giving the underlying data more metadata to work with. So that brings us back to how we're going to apply ChatGPT into Libra. So it's coming in a couple of phases. So the first phase of the Libra app, which isn't launched yet, but you can go to libra.law and sign up to find out more or potentially get involved as a provider. But the first phase is actually a very controlled environment, whereby we're using hard-coded decision tree logic to give people access to resources, to take them through a legal journey to work out how to solve that problem. We're starting with family law, consumer law, and housing. And obviously those are all massive areas in themselves. So the way that we've gone about that with Northumbria University has been to really unpick what are the, as it was said earlier, those sort of tacit decisions that lawyers are taking when they're presented with a client and a case. And this is just looking at one potential decision tree. And as you can see, it gets pretty complicated quite quickly. So this has all been hard coded using the table decision tree builder into the Libra app, so that people can go through a typical journey, which I'll take you on now. So looking at how a litigant in person might use the app to navigate a legal issue. So they get into the app. They can manage multiple legal issues, look at resources, and start their own new legal issue journey. So they're presented with a disclaimer. So again, you're trying to manage that risk, let them know that we're not giving legal advice. They need to get real lawyers to get involved at certain points, and the app will actually direct them to law firms and law clinics at the right point. And as I said, we're looking for partners there to become those legal providers. So you go through area of law. So in this case, a housing dispute. Again, this is all hard coded, so there's no guesswork here by lawyers or by the individuals, by the litigants in person. They then select the area that they want to go into in more detail. This hasn't been built out fully yet, so they're just looking at a deposit issue here. How to recover your deposit from a landlord. As you proceed through, they're asked to check whether they have a short hold tenancy agreement in place. This is the sort of area where in the future you would look to be using ChatGPT or another system to enable the user to just simply take a photo of the front of their app, their tenancy agreement, or upload it. But remember, accessibility and who your user is a huge part of this, which is part of the reason we're using an app here, because the majority of the users, and we work with local government on apps in different contexts as well, the majority of the users don't have access to a MacBook Air. These are people that will have a smartphone, but they don't all have access to scanners unless they go to the library, for example. So these are sort of issues you're thinking about. So GPT implementation here would be that you're taking a photo of your tenancy agreement and it's telling you if it is a short hold tenancy agreement or not. For now, you can get some more prompting in the app. If I go through to the next screen, so was your deposit protected in an authorized deposit protection scheme? And you can then actually get some more information about that, check if your deposit is protected. So we're not doing all of that in the app, but people can go and use the systems that are out there to check if their deposit is protected or not. Come back to the app. If it turns out it is, then they can go through to the next page, which will take them through to the deposit scheme dispute resolution process and actually send them off to the relevant dispute resolution process. If not, they can go back, just taking you back here, if they were to select no, that the deposit wasn't protected properly. It's obviously a different dispute mechanism that is then in place because the deposit hasn't been properly protected. So they then go to the next screen. It's then asking them if they want to make a claim against their landlord for failure to protect the deposit. And again, more information provided there under the pop-ups, but essentially either sending a template letter to their landlord or actually making a claim in court. So in this example, just coming through to a template letter of claim, which again, once you're implementing ChatGPT, that can automatically be generated with the information that's been inputted by the user. I mean, you don't have to use ChatGPT to do that, of course. So we will be populating people's documentation in the app to send off, and then documenting that through an entire journey. The idea here with the app is partly through the enhanced data that the Ministry of Justice is putting in place to link different apps together, is to actually enable the information that's being put into the system to be able to be fed through to online dispute resolution systems, whether it's money claims online or others, and give the user a place to hold all that information in one place. So the app also contains resources. So just a couple of examples: family and housing. So you might have links out to other resources there, finding information about family court fees, for example, or a load of template documents, so disrepair, damages, etc. But obviously, to an unfamiliar user, how do they know which templates to use, etc., which is where these decision tree workflows come into place. So yeah, the app also suggests providers. So rather than simply saying go to court and file a claim, it will actually suggest local legal support providers, whether those are legal clinics. I noticed there are a number of university legal clinics on the call, for example, that could be referenced here. Northumbria will be one of the first, obviously, but we're not limiting it to one. I'm sure Northumbria don't want to be receiving cases from all over the country. So the idea is that local people will be directed to local providers to support them along with the app where they've already inputted their information. And as I say, the ChatGPT functionality would then actually, and sorry, you've got some suggested providers there, where the marketplace will gradually develop as we add more people in and can direct people to the right firms or pro bono clinics to work with. So yeah, and when the AI element comes in, we will introduce a chat element into this as well, which is then feeding in on the information that we've got from the refined LLMs as part of Project Odyssey. So yeah, quite an ambitious project.
Just one more minute here, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, sure. No, I'm pretty much done now, I think. Just to say, it is an ambitious project on the AI side. I think it's a 20-month project, so there'll be a period of annotating the information. But in the background, the Libra app will be being further developed, more providers added, and more areas of law added as well. So yeah, very happy to speak to people about becoming a provider on the app, but also partnering into different areas of law that the app will cover in time. And Paul, I think maybe you might want to add anything else there.
Yeah, for time purposes, I'm not going to add much. I just saw a comment popping up about good for literate users. And I think it's important to note that we're not naive to think that this is going to solve all the problems of the access to justice gap, but it's about making a contribution to solving the problem. So if you can assist a number of literate users, people that are able to resolve their problems or be directed appropriately to resources that can resolve their problems, then hopefully that's going to build capacity within the system, that there's further support for people that do perhaps require that extra support. But I'll leave it there for a time perspective. Thank you.
Thank you both so much. Again, questions in the chat would be great. So we've got 15 minutes. We've got 2 more speakers. We can get them both in if we're nice and speedy about it. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it on to Stu Pearson. Stu, thanks so much for being with us today. Stu is the Head of Innovation at Citizens Advice, Stockport, Oldham, Rochdale, and Trafford. So why don't you take it away?
Is it sharing? Yeah, cool.
Yep.
Yes, so obviously I'll be quick. So I just wanted to speak about Caddy, which is our AI advisor co-pilot, talk about the kind of journey in terms of development. So we initially developed it in-house within Citizens Advice. So to address a pain point we had, which was the amount of support chats that were going to supervisors. We kind of showed it to National Citizens Advice. They were really interested in. Since October, we've been working with the Cabinet Office's 10DS team to build on the prototype and build what is now called CADDI. So what is CADDI? So it is a generative AI LLM powered bot. So we use retrieval augmented generation. So essentially what that means is CADDI only ever goes to trusted sources. So at the moment it's focused on gov.uk and the Citizens Advice public site and the Citizens Advice backend AdviserNet resource. The ambition of CADDI was to ensure that we're providing quicker answers to clients, primarily on telephone and digital channels, but it could be used for face-to-face as well, to also improve the confidence of advisors. So one of the things we've noticed, and this might be replicated with other advice providers, is it's been hard to recruit experienced advisors, so we've got a lot of trainees. So CADDI has been really kind of acting as kind of stabilizers for new advisors, building up their confidence. And obviously one of the big goals is to kind of really reduce the demand on supervisors and free them up to support advisors with more complex issues. When we initially launched the prototype, we did a huge kind of hearts and minds piece to kind of reassure advisors and supervisors that CADDI is not about replacing them. This is about obviously improving the service and freeing them up to provide obviously the empathy and understanding that clients need. So how do you use CADDI? So CADDI is an app that's deployed within either Google Workspace or Microsoft Teams environment, and advisors can access it just by kind of calling up the app. They can either do that in a private chat or they can do it within the shared supervisor space. So how the process works, when we were developing CADDI, we had some quick red lines that we wanted to impose. One of them was clients would only ever speak to a human advisor. So CADDI sits behind that. So the advisor, if they're unsure with a query that a client's got, what they will do now is bring up CADDI. CADDI will get their response, look at the trusted sources, so AdviserNet, gov.uk, and then present the answer, which includes the sources it got it from, not to the advisor, but to a supervisor. The supervisor reviews that response and then either gives it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. So if it's a thumbs up, the answer will then go back to the advisor, who then knows that confidently this can be passed, this information can then explained, passed on to a client. We thought it was really important to have a human in the loop process. So we've got an audit trail of kind of what advice is validated by who as well. So from an QAA point of view, even though CADDI has provided the answer, it's the supervisor who's validated that response. So again, we found that's really important, again, to mitigate any kind of reputational risk for the organisation, but most importantly, that any advice given is given via a human. Some of the kind of learning we've had from CADDI experience. So we started it in June with our prototype, and since January we've been using the CADDI version. Has been about really the prompt engineering side of it, so that kind of better prompts for better answers. So we've done a lot of work with advisors to make sure that when they're asking the questions, one, they're asking it as an advisor, not as a client, and that they're putting as much context in that. So, you know, they're being very specific about what the client is asking, including all the kind of personal circumstances that could impact on the answers, and also including any kind of steps that the client's already taken. So we've been running a pilot with the government. So the government have got an independent evaluation team who are kind of working with 6 offices at a 6-week trial. They're measuring the accuracy of the responses. They're looking at the impact on returning results. So there's it's a bit frustrating for our team, but there is a bit where CADDI won't work because it wants the supervisor to return the response. So what they want to do is then see if there is a massive increase in the impact at time with returning those responses. Obviously, we're collecting advisor feedback throughout the process. And again, through this kind of whistle stop, so I've had to kind of edit the slides, so sorry if it seems brief, but the feedback from advisors and supervisors has been, they definitely see the value. The approval rate, which is the validated responses from CADDI by supervisors, is at 80%, and some of that 20% is where it's not, they've not got the full context. So it's sometimes it's better questions, but also the next point is sometimes it's trusted sources, because we've kind of at the moment restricted it to 2 trusted sources. A lot of advisors use, say, CPAG or they'll use, for example, Shelter or Acast. So the next step is increasing the number of trusted sources that CADI can access. The other thing is with CADI, the way we developed it, because we really wanted to obviously try to do it ethically and responsibly, we've kind of tried to do it as a one and done process. So what advisors are asking is, well, could we have kind of a follow-up conversation with CADI, which would need to think in again how you would link that validation in. And then for more experienced advisors, they're saying, well, actually, I'd like to use this as a really augmented, powerful search tool. So could we have the option to kind of have self-approvals, which again, we'd still have the audit trail, and again, the advice, even though supported by AI, would be delivered by a human. It would increase adoption of CADI, and for a lot more experienced advisors, they think they would see much more value to it than having to go through a supervisor. So yeah, so hopefully that was enough and in time that allows somebody else to speak.
Thank you so much, Stu. That was really great. I appreciate that, and your conscientious timing. So we'll circulate all your slides afterwards. And again, everybody feel free to pop questions there. A really, really interesting walkthrough there. So thank you so much. And now we're finally thrilled to be joined by Mark Pierce, who's the CEO of Wiser, who's going to discuss what's needed from funders in the front line to enable the implementation of working AI efficiency tools such as Wiser. So Mark, take away with the last few minutes.
Thanks, Emmeline. Right, I'll try to break this down into the remaining minutes that we've got left. Otherwise, this is a 10-minute presentation. But essentially, we've been building AI services and implementing them for the last 4 years. And I'm going to focus on one of the services that we do. And there's one big problem that isn't talked about enough within AI that I want to just sort of finish on. So very quick introduction in terms of what we do. So we're an organization that doesn't just focus on the access to justice sort of sector. We focus on the whole guidance and advice sector because we see that there are backlogs everywhere, and they're all outstripping what we call affordable supply. So not everyone can afford a solicitor or a financial advisor or other expert advisors. And we feel that generative AI is part of that solution. So we're building these tools. And it's important to note that we're scaling the human touch, not replacing it, with generative AIs, that we can meet that demand. So what we find, the effect of some of our tools is that it makes the process more efficient. It's right first time data capture. It results in a better customer experience and more timely solutions to the challenges they face. On the supply side, it increases productivity, increases capacity, and lowers the cost to serve. So it results in more accessible experts who can focus on aspects of cases only when they are needed. So if I then focus on one of the products that we've made, which is called Assist, and what it does, with consent, it listens into the conversation between service user and agent. It transcribes the call, so it's a voice-to-text service. It then analyzes all that information in real time. It summarizes it, applies the right codes, even makes certain prompts, and then shows that to the advisor, who can then review it quickly before saying, yes, that's an accurate description or summary of the call, and it goes straight into the CRM system. What that results in is a 90% time saving in data entry, and it increases their capacity by 10 to 20%. So we started this work over 18 months ago, and it was funded by CivTech and the Scottish Government, and also Citizens Advice Scotland, who are using it now. So when we were designing the process, Citizen wanted right first time data capture, so they didn't have to repeat themselves, and because they wanted to speed up the process. Experts wanted to spend more time with the customer and less time entering data. And generative AI seemed to be capable of taking unstructured data and making sense of it to deliver what they wanted. So the process that we went through was very much an agile development process, all informed by deep user research. As an organization, we take open source models and we fine tune them. So we work with lots of different models like Mistral, Meta's Llama, Google's BERT, T5, Amazon's Alexa TM, and so on. I think highly regulated sectors should be working with organizations like some of the ones that you've heard that have taken those LLMs and fine-tune them for the regulated sector using the organization's data. I think it's absolutely essential. It means hallucinations and lies are avoided. It means updates do not suddenly change the service you developed. as happens with closed source tools like OpenAI, although we've renamed it Closed AI, and some of the LLMs that they have in market. And it means the data remains in your control, and you're not in breach of GDPR. So as we went through this process of developing this tool for Citizens Advice Scotland, there were various risks that came up, mitigations that we had to put in place. One of them was actually understanding accents throughout the region. So we went to Innovate UK and applied for a grant and got it funded to build our own automatic speech recognition model, which we're now 6 months into. It's a really big project, but what it will do will capture a lot more in the majority of accents throughout the UK. So we will have the best automatic speech recognition model for the sort of advice and guidance market. So there were some technical challenges, there's no doubt about that. You know, some CRMs and CMSs didn't have APIs, but we had to figure out some of the workarounds. Some of the phone call providers, we had difficulty in getting some of the data around them. There were challenges around some of the models and the way that advisors gave feedback and how we had to implement that going forward. You know, some people felt that it should know more, but it, you know, it can only really create a summary on what it hears, not what's in your head or what it hasn't seen. But also there was the automatic speech recognition model, and we had to resolve that. But I can tell you now that all of those technical problems were tiny compared with one big problem for AI, and that is change management. You see, people do not like changes just to happen to them. They want to be taken on a journey so they feel comfortable with that change. They have all sorts of concerns. So this will take my job, it will get it wrong and risk my job, it will hallucinate, it will mislead service users, it will have bias in it, it will remove the human touch, it will threaten my power, which I measure as the number of people that I manage, etc., etc., etc. If you don't address those things at the outset and during the project, you will get wholesale organ rejection. People just won't use it. And we've heard, we went through some hard yards getting this through, but we're getting to the stage now where people are starting to use it at scale, which is absolutely fantastic. But do not underestimate change management. So what is change management? So it's aligning with the business goals. Like, change management helps ensure the implementation aligns with each organization's overall strategic goals and objectives. It minimizes resistance. You know, because people are used to the processes and tools they already use, you need to get them to understand these new rules, new tools. It optimizes processes. You know, the technology is integrated seamlessly into the business. You've got risk mitigation. It identifies potential risks and develops strategies to mitigate them. And then there's, of course, clear and consistent communication throughout the entire project, before, during, and after. So at Wiser, we had to build a consulting arm that provides change management that helps people, and it ranges from the provision of a few days, helping clients educate their experts and their staff on what AI is, how it can help, defining use cases and so on, to providing, we also had to provide months of support, you know, actual experts going in and speaking to people, holding their hand, making them understand how it works. So in other words, we were helping the change in partnership with that organization. But really, change management is probably the hardest thing that we've come across within AI. So I'm just going to leave you with this slide, which just talks about some of the modules that we've created. If you go to our website, you'll see the services we do, the products that we have, but hopefully that gives you a taster of what we've done, but also what we see as the biggest challenge around AI in the market. That's it, very quick.
Mark, thank you so much. It's a really brilliant presentation, and I really, it resonates with me a lot when you're talking about change management. But I can really see the value of this, especially when we're talking about you know, capacity and supply and demand. So just a really, really interesting presentation there. Thank you so much for your time. So with that, we made it. We got through all our speakers. Huge thanks to all of our contributors today. I feel like this has been a really great session. We really appreciate you taking the time to share your learning and expertise with the rest of the community. And thank you also to everyone who's been using the chat. I've seen that it's been quite active, so we're going to make sure we include all of these comments and questions in the follow-up as well. Just to flag that our next meeting is going to be on Thursday, September 5th at the same time, 10 to 11:30. I'll send out invites and details about that agenda in due course. But please do have a think about if there's anything you'd like to see or share or discuss. My inbox is always open. Please reach out. And if there's any projects that you heard today or connections that you want to make, I'm also here to facilitate those. So thank you so much for everybody again. I just really appreciate it. And I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day and your weekend.